Our third lecture of the Ancient Rome unit is going to be on the Punic Wars. We're talking about the Punic Wars for our quiz for each of the three Punic Wars we want to talk about in this video. We want to make sure we understand why it was fought, the cause, what happened, as well as the effects of that war. So that's what the quiz is going to ask you about. So as we work our way through that, I'll make sure I'm clear in my statements, but that's the big thing we want to take away is what was the cause of each war, what happened, and what were the effects. So make sure we're getting that in our notes as we're working our way through this. We've been building to this point for the last two lectures. We've been making the point clear that Italy has a lot of resources, and the Italian peninsula itself has the ability to support a lot of people. And as Rome begins to expand within Italy, it's able to absorb and conquer and utilize the increased manpower of the peninsula to be able to assert its dominance up and down Italy. This also allows Rome to begin to expand its trading network in the Mediterranean as well. And so, this expansion of its trade after very much conquering and absorbing the peoples of the Italian Empire to become quote unquote Romans, that is going to lead it into conflict with other groups. Now we want to pause and take a sidebar here and make sure we put up a signpost and understand that this is the expansion of Rome is not an inevitable event. We talk about the contingent nature of history itself, that the Romans are not destined to be the conquerors of Western Europe, are not destined to turn the Mediterranean into a Roman lake. In the year 270 BC, Rome, the city, the leadership, the people, are very content with holding onto the territory of the the Italian peninsula itself. Sicily might be nice, Sardinia might be nice, Corsica might be nice to be able to contain it under control, but there's no driving need for it. There's no want, there's no desire. So if we put ourselves in the time machine, hit 88 miles per hour, go back to this point in Roman history, there's not this inevitable feeling. There's not like what you feel in the 1800s in the United States with manifest destiny. There's no need for Rome to expand, and there's no real push for it to happen. So we'll see over the course of the next couple of slides here how it does happen, but what we start out with before the Punic Wars is not necessarily what's going to happen. Right? It's very much contingent on things that will happen and developments along the way. One of those groups that Rome will come into conflict with are going to be the Carthaginians on the North African coast. And very much it's important to understand that the Punic Wars are going to be fought between Rome on one side and Carthage on the other. We've talked about Carthage a little bit in our Mesopotamia unit. We talked about how Carthage in North Africa is the descendant from Phoenicians, sailors in the Mediterranean who were going out and founding it in the Syrian conquests of the 800 BCs as Eastern Phoenicia and the Eastern Mediterranean comes under the heel and the domination of the Assyrians, and we all know that they're not the nicest rulers, the nicest of peoples. We see a major movement of the Phoenicians westward to Carthage, and then from there they're able to expand. Geographically, Carthage has the advantage of being located on a superb harbor ringed by very fertile fields in North Africa. Uh, Carthage is debatably, but you make a very strong case, the best harbor in all of the Mediterranean. It is a deep water port, meaning that boats can sail almost directly into the heart of the city itself. And you don't have to build a pier, you don't have to have an island system, you don't have all that stuff. You can bring your boats, which again, the more stuff you have in the boat, the deeper it sinks into the water. So the deeper the water goes closer to the coast is more beneficial. You can drive your boat right up into the center, unload it right into the marketplace, and then vice versa, load it back out and send it out into the Mediterranean world. So that's the nice thing that it has. By the 500 BCs, Carthaginians have a pretty vast trading network in the Mediterranean. They have trading posts in North Africa, Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and Spain. The greater Carthage really just consists of the city-state on the North African coast, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are just in that place. They've got these outposts that are bringing resources in and allows them to be able to then go and trade with the rest of the peoples of the Mediterranean. What allows them to maintain this trade network and trade domination, particularly of the Western Mediterranean, is a very large navy. It's what they're known for. And something a little bit different that we haven't talked about too much in world history by this point is they also have an army, and that navy is very much going to be staffed with mercenaries. Mercenaries are soldiers of fortune. They are soldiers who are paid to fight for a particular person, place, or country. A lot of Greeks are going to be mercenaries in the Carthaginians. We talked about all the fighting that's going on in Greece. If your city state in Greece is not fighting, you maybe hire out your skills to the highest bidder, and Carthage is willing to pay a whole lot. We've talked a lot about different city states and different forms of government throughout the year so far. But what makes Carthage a little bit different and a little bit unique is the city itself ran itself like a very large company, meaning that if Carthage with a capital C did well in a particular year and they were able to pull in a large amount of profit for the city itself, each individual citizen would get a share of that profit. Similar to how the oil companies used to cut a check to the people of Alaska for just living in Alaska to allow the oil companies to destroy and degrade the environment of Alaska to pull that oil out. You get a check every year from that. So a little bit different in how it's set up. And again, very much trying to encourage everyone within the city of Carthage to pull their own weight, because everybody, even the smallest action, you add those up over time and you're able to get more profits. It's kind of like a co-op ownership of a company today, where the janitor might just be doing janitorial duties, but that's going to work its way through the sales staff and the logistics staff and the CEO, and everybody gets a share of the profits and rewards there. So a little bit different from what we've seen before, so we just want to make sure we mention it. Carthage, located here in North Africa, and we see in the darker areas this area here. Now, usually we ask the question in class, looking at this, we know that the upcoming wars, and we got 3 of them coming, are going to be between the Carthaginians down there in the southwest and the Romans in this map north and west from there. If you're taking a look at this, I usually don't fault very many kids who say that if you're going to put money down, you're placing your bets based on just this map alone for the 3 wars coming up. Well, obviously, Mr. Kramer, Carthage has a lot more territory, and Carthage looks like it has a lot more people in it because it's got a lot more territory. So they have the advantage. We're going to put our money down. And again, really shouldn't want to blame you too much. We really want to point out, though, as we start getting into the Punic Wars, what is going to be located almost directly between the Romans and the Carthaginians is going to be the island of Sicily. So we're going to come back to this in a second, this idea. But if we're starting to figure out why might we have a war, well, this seems to be about halfway between those two sides. So hints, winks, nudges as we're going. Carthage, the city itself, again, it's known for its harbor. You can drive your boat nearly right in smack dab into the center of the city, right into the heart, and the harbor itself. And so it's known for that. It's one of the nice things that Carthage has geographically. And then again, you can see the fields ringing it outside to be able to bring in the wealth to there. So we have 3 Punic Wars. The first Punic War, we should know why it's fought. And as I just highlighted, we pointed out with the laser pointer right before this, is that's going to be fought over control of the island of Sicily. Sicily, the island in the Mediterranean, one of the larger islands in the Mediterranean, right off the toe of the boot that is the peninsula of Italy, and almost halfway between the Romans and the Carthaginians. Now we've said, and we don't want to belate the point too much, is the idea that the Romans aren't really looking to expand, but if they were going to go someplace, it makes kind of sense that the Straits of Sicily are not that formidable, are easy to navigate. So it makes sense that the Romans, an easy way for them to navigate out of the Italian peninsula itself is to just go to Sicily. A lot harder to go over the Alps or other places. So it makes sense that the Romans are moving that direction. The Carthaginians are already there, and that's going to cause the first Punic War to be fought. Now, we are a freshman class in world history, so we're not going to go into the very nitty-gritty of this, but it should make sense. Neither side can walk to Sicily, so you're going to need navies. Carthage has the advantage. They've got a much better navy than the Romans have initially, and so what we see here is 2 major naval engagements, 2 major naval campaigns. The first Roman fleet is sent over to the Carthaginians. They fight a series of battles, and this results in a defeat of the Romans. We talk about this idea again and again and again. The Romans can take a punch, and the Romans are able to weather this adversity. The Romans have a fleet of warships sent to the bottom of the Mediterranean. And what makes the Romans different from other groups, what makes the Romans keep coming back, is their resiliency. And what do the Romans do after their first fleet is sent to the bottom of the Mediterranean? They build another. So they go, and this is why this is going to last a while. They build up another fleet, make some tactical changes, send it out. And again, we're condensing a lot of history into a little bit. And what is the end effect after nearly, 20 years of fighting? What happens in the First Punic War is Rome's going to win. So they are able to win, again, mostly naval campaigns, naval battles. And Rome then is able, after the First Punic War, to gain its first overseas province, the province of Sicily. So it makes sense here. We need to know the causes. We need to know what happens. We need to know the effects. So the effects of the First Punic War now include Rome as the largest navy in the Mediterranean Sea. The second navy that the Romans built, a little bit more formidable, a little bit better, but more importantly, their biggest adversary in the Mediterranean, the Carthaginian fleet, has been defeated in the First Punic War. Where's the Carthaginian fleet? It's at the bottom of the Mediterranean. And unlike the Romans, and again, we're simplifying and we're skipping some important details here, but the Carthaginians have a much harder time of putting another navy back into service as quickly as the Romans do. So the Romans now have the advantage of a large navy, the largest in the area in the Mediterranean. Rome's determination is shown. Okay, again, if newspapers or TV existed at the time, you're in Alexandria in Egypt, you're in Corinth in Greece, you're in Ephesus in modern day Turkey, you're reading this on the front page of the newspaper, you're following this on the news, and you're saying, oh boy, these Romans are not going to quit. These Romans know what they're doing, and this very much makes a name for Rome in that they can lose an entire fleet of warships and then return and come back. From Carthage's point of view, one of the major effects of the First Punic War is the anger of the Carthaginians. They were not expecting this. They don't want this young whippersnapper, these upstart Romans, to take away this from them. And again, if you're Carthage and your city is run as a large company, you are losing money if you are losing Sicily. So the Carthaginians don't like this, and this is going to cause problems. Again, if you're used to bringing X number of dollars, and now that amount has decreased because you've lost one of your provinces, you are going to upset a lot of the economy, the society of the Carthage itself. So they're angry. So if you're Carthage, the other effect that you want to put yourself is you've got to make up this lost revenue that you've lost by losing Sicily. So the Carthaginians need to expand some other places. Think of holding a balloon. You squeeze the balloon in one space. That's going to go and push the air from, say, the right side, now the left side. So if Carthage can't expand westward or eastward towards Rome, it can't go and take over all of Sicily. It's lost Sicily. It needs to expand. Where it can expand away from the Romans, it's going to expand into Spain. And hints, winks, nudges, this might lead right into another war. So again, we're talking about the island of Sicily here. It's about equidistance between Rome and Carthage, and that's the major driver of the fighting. Lots of different fighting within the two sides. In the First Punic War, the Romans are going to develop boats with these big giant bridges with the big metal spike and hook at the top that they can drop into the wooden decks of the Carthaginian fleets, and now it's no longer a naval battle. You hook the two ships together. These are ship-to-ship combat. This is just fighting on land, but you're fighting on top of the Mediterranean. Where most of these ships of this era sent to the bottom of the Mediterranean, and they're still pulling keels and rudders out from this conflict. The Romans are going to pull so many of these Carthaginian rudders out of the Mediterranean that they're going to make a monument of them to show their victory of the First Punic Wars, how happy the Romans are in their victory here. So again, we talk about the different flavors of the Punic Wars. We want to keep them apart. The First Punic War is very much a naval engagement, lots of boats on the water. Second Punic War, we talked about this. We need to know why it was fought, the cause of the Second Punic War. If Carthage loses Sicily, they need to expand to make up the revenue in other places. They begin to expand into Spain. Well, Rome, that now also has the increased revenue of Sicily, they now can have extra money to spend. They look to expand. They're looking to Spain, and lo and behold, they run into Carthage yet again. Something that we'll see pop up throughout world history here, and kind of a truism of military history that we'll see happen pretty regularly is that generals tend to prepare for the next war as a replay of the previous war. So the Roman generals, and it's hard to fault them if they are going to fight against Carthage again here in the Second Punic War, that they expect Carthage to send their fleet to Rome. That's how you defeat the Romans. You take on Rome. And so they make sense that the Romans decide they're going to fight the Carthaginians again. Let's ready the ships. Let's put the sailors on the boats and let's go put them right outside the Roman walls and wait for the Carthaginians to arrive. Well, if you're the Carthaginians, this is where, again, history is kind of throwing you a curveball. The Carthaginians cannot fight the First Punic War all over again because the Carthaginian fleet that they would need to sail from Carthage to Rome is at the bottom of the Mediterranean. So they need to be able to figure out a way to attack the Romans, but they can't just do it in a straightforward attack, which the Romans are expecting and preparing for. So the major difference between the two Punic Wars, again, if we need to be able to tell them apart, is the Carthaginian general Hannibal. Hannibal, as a teenager, has been fighting in the Carthaginian army underneath his father, so he's very well prepared, and again, one of the great military geniuses and tacticians in all of world history. Hannibal decides that, and again, let's see if I can get on my pen here. Yeah, here we go. So if Carthage is down over here, you got Sicily, and you got our, there's our boot, right? There's Italy, there's Rome here, right? If you're Carthage, you can't just sail right there, right? It's not going to make sense. You can't do it because there's no ships there. So what Hannibal does is, I'm not going to sail my army straight right into the teeth of the Roman defenses. I'm going to sail eastward into, and there's Spain, and then there's France, and then we're down over here. And we'll keep drawing. There's Greece. Right? I'm going to sail over into Spain, to Saguntum, right, modern day Barcelona. And then from there, I'm going to march my army over the Pyrenees Mountains from Spain into modern day France, and then across southern France, and then from France now over the Alps into Italy and attack Rome from behind, which the Romans are not expecting and the Romans don't think could possibly happen. So that's what he's going to do. So Hannibal marches his army, including estimated 80 war elephants, over the Pyrenees and the Alps to attack into Italy and Rome from behind. If you're the Romans, you're facing out to sea, waiting for this Carthaginian fleet to arrive. It never arrives because their attack is coming on the land from behind. And in a series of battles, the Roman army is defeated leftwards, upwards, downwards, and rightwards. The major battle of this part of the campaign, and one of the great Carthaginian victories in the Punic Wars, is at Cannae, where 80,000 Romans are trapped, encircled, and destroyed in a single battle by Hannibal and the Carthaginians. And we'll talk about this when we show you this in a second. Cannae is going to loom large in the military minds of generals even into the present day. So this is a big deal. 80,000 people are what are able to squeeze into the AT&T Stadium to watch the Dallas Cowboys play on a Sunday afternoon. This is a lot of people. And if you're the Romans, this is not looking good because your army has been encircled, destroyed, and gotten rid of at Cannae. Hannibal now has no sizable Roman force to stop it from taking Rome. The only issue is that after these defeats and after this marches, he just does not have the strength to take on the city of Rome itself. Hannibal is smart enough to realize that the soldiers and the army that he has is not equipped for a large siege of Rome itself and is not able to, and you're going to need reinforcements to get within the city walls. So Hannibal sees the walls and is very content with running roughshod over the Roman countryside, literally with his elephants stomping on the crops to try to starve Rome into submission. Hannibal, if he can't defeat Rome by taking the city, he's going to starve it and is running pretty much unchecked through the Italian peninsula because the Romans don't have another army on level with the Carthaginians to do that. So if you're the Romans, you're sitting behind your walls, you're looking at these elephants, you're looking at this Carthaginian army, and you're saying, we got to get these guys out of here. Okay, for the bare minimum, we got to help our people out. We've got to remove this army, this war away to them. But what can we do? What is the something that we can do that's going to convince Hannibal that he needs to leave? So the Romans sit down together, and their major general Scipio says Hannibal needs to defend, at the bare minimum, one place on the earth in order to be able to keep this war going. And that place is Carthage. So the Roman general Scipio gambles by leaving Italy and taking the Roman army and marching on Carthage. The Carthaginian army might not be able to take on Rome and its vast walls, but the Roman army, weakened as it is, might just be enough to take on a unprepared and undefended Carthage. And that's his plan. He goes to invades the city to get Hannibal out of Italy. That works. Hannibal and the Carthaginians rush back to defend their homeland. And at the Battle of Zama, the climactic battle of the Second Punic War, Hannibal is defeated by Scipio. He gets the title of Africanus, Scipio Africanus, the conqueror of Africa, and the Carthaginians have now been defeated for the second time. The effects of the Second Punic War, very simple. It's fought over Spain. Rome now expands into Spain. The Carthaginians are kicked out, and Rome now has two new provinces in Spain itself. The major effect of this is that the Carthaginians, with the defeat at Zama, are defeated thoroughly and consequentially. Okay? This is a major defeat of the Carthaginians. Hannibal is alive, but he's not going to be a factor. He's going to be locked up. He's going to be dealt with, and the Carthaginians now have to pay a fee, or are forced to pay an indemnity, reparations, for the next 50 years to pay for the damage that Hannibal and the Carthaginians have done to the Italian countryside and the Romans. And so Rome very much now is the dominant player in the Western Mediterranean. Still not looking to expand very far just as yet, but they've wet their whistle. They see what expansion can bring them, and so they are happy to be able to continue to do that. So Carthage is now still around, but a much more diminished power. They have to work within the Roman system of trade and control of the Western Mediterranean. So this is Hannibal's invasion route. And again, we walked through this on the previous slide. Instead of going and sailing directly from Carthage to Rome, which is what the Romans are expecting, he sails from Carthage to Saguntum, modern day Barcelona, right? Begins to work his way over the Pyrenees Mountains into southern France, over the Alps Mountains into northern Italy, and then down the Italian peninsula to be able to go and fight his way through there. Again, one of the interesting things that he does, what are the advantages that he brings with him, is his 80 war elephants to be able to go and help him on the battlefield. And if you're a Roman soldier who's only ever been in Italy his entire life, have an elephant marching towards you is kind of a big thing. And this is going to loom large in history for a long time. And that's the funny joke with that cartoon there, was to bring these elephants down in there and to fight major battles that we see in there. Now, the Battle of Cannae is important in a military history context for the idea that the Romans here in red are going to be suckered into fighting and advancing towards the Carthaginian center. Hannibal has that center retreat, allowing for the Carthaginian wings to spring behind and around the Romans and encircle them. And the Carthaginians describe the complete and total and utter destruction of the Roman army here at Cannae. The Carthaginians describe the Romans being squeezed and packed so tightly that they couldn't even raise their shields and swords to protect themselves as the Carthaginians poked and slashed and sliced their way to the middle. And I like to go and say, put yourself in the shoes, the sandals of one of these Roman soldiers stuck in the middle, as you can hear the screams and you can the shouts and the fear building as the Carthaginians are slicing and hacking their way closer and closer to you, and there's nothing you can go and do about it. So this is a major battle, and this is something that generals for up into the modern time, the Army War College for United States Army officers, teaches an ancient history course and studies the Battle of Cannae. And we'll see this time and time and time again of generals trying to recreate this throughout different periods of history to be able to get their own personal Cannae to find an enemy army, engage in battle, encircle it, and destroy it. And we'll see the impact of this battle throughout the rest of all of world history. It's a big deal, again, particularly from a military history point of view. Hannibal is going to be someone who is not only going to destroy the Romans' army, but very much loom large in Roman consciousness, Roman history. So this is a statue of the Carthaginian general Hannibal after Cannae, made by the Romans to kind of give him his dues, to give him a tip of the cap and say, yeah, you beat us and beat us good. It's hard to visualize what 80,000 people looks like, but we want to give you some small sense here, is that if you look here in, that would be his left hand, he's got a handful of rings is what he's dropping into that container, that vase there. A Roman equestrian, a Roman patrician, to mark his place in society, would have a ring on his finger to show his status. And what Hannibal is doing in the statue is dropping and counting the rings of all the patricians slayed on this battlefield. And that gives you a small slice of the destruction that Hannibal raised across. They're going to Scipio runs back to Carthage, goes and gets Hannibal to do that, and he's going to defeat them at the Battle of Zama to end the Second Punic War. So to finish up with this slide here, we fought the First Punic War, the Second Punic War. We're just focusing on that for today. Understand that we're just giving you very much the bare bones of Roman history here, because from 215 to 160 BC, in the interim, as well as fighting with this Second Punic War, Rome also begins to advance eastward. It's wet its whistle by moving into, I think it's Transalpine Gaul, just on the other side of the Alps into southern modern-day France, a little bit of Switzerland, as well as taste into Spain, as well as Sicily, the other islands. They also begin to move eastward, conquering Greece, Syria, and Rhodes. So the question becomes, Rome is now defeated Carthage in battle twice. They are the undisputed masters of the Western Mediterranean. They have territory and expanded eastward into these major rich areas. So the First Punic War very much kind of bled in the Second Punic War. Why are we fighting a Third Punic War? Well, the cause of the Third Punic War very much is simply Romans are just suspicious of Carthage. And the Romans, this idea of Hannibal showing up unannounced and a surprise, very much for a long time becomes this idea of this specter, this boogeyman in Roman consciousness and Roman ideas of when is the next attack coming? Where is Hannibal? Is that an elephant trumpeting on the horizon, or is that just a thunderstorm moving in? So the Romans are convinced that there is another attack coming from Carthage, which should not logically make sense. Carthage is a very much weakened power. After what we said, after the Second Punic War, they are forced to pay a huge ransom for the next 50 years after the Second Punic War, which is all this money is going to Rome. They can spend it however they want. Carthage is losing that money. That's money that they don't have. Rome is expanding eastward. It's expanding westward. Rome is so much more stronger, and yet the impact of that Second Punic War is such that they are looking over their shoulder all the time. The famous Roman senator Cato the Elder would go and have his Senate sessions and would go and summarize, hey, there's rioting in the Egyptian quarter of Rome. Hey, smallpox is broken out in the Greek quarter. We got to be able to finish up some contracts with some of our eastern client states. And oh yes, one more thing before we go. Carthago est delestro. All right, Carthage must be destroyed, as he slams his hand in there. And whether that's apocryphal or that's what actually happened, this is the kind of thing, the idea that they're building up the case that Carthage is still out there, and a Carthage that's still out there is still a dangerous Carthage, ready to send Hannibal Jr., Hannibal III, Hannibal IV to go and defeat Rome for the first time. So how do we go and we stop this from happening? If the cause of the Romans is just suspicious of Carthage, we just make sure it doesn't happen. So what happens during the Third Punic War? Again, to simplify, from 149 to 146 BC, Rome is going to invade and then lay siege to the city of Carthage. They surround it by land, don't let anything in or out, try a blockade, but again, the deep water port of Carthage allows this to extend into a 3-year-long siege. Eventually, the Romans get into the city itself. And the effect of the Third Punic War is over 17 days. Carthage is burned, destroyed, and then deconstructed over 17 days. 50,000 Carthaginians surrender and survive this Roman attack. They are sold off into the four corners of the Mediterranean slave market to never have existed again. Uh, the Romans are said to have burned the city, burn the rubble, and then walk through the city of Carthage. And if there were two bricks standing from a house, they would be knocked over. So the city was wiped off the face of the earth. The poetic nature of this destruction, the legend that's passed down is the Romans then took great bags of salt and to the fields ringing Carthage, they plowed salt into the earth so nothing would ever grow there ever again. The Romans salted the earth to make sure that Carthage would never come back and haunt them again. Now that's very much, again, apocryphal. That did not happen, and we know it didn't happen because 100 years later, right, Caesar is going to show up and he's going to build a city on top, a Roman city on top of Carthage, to be able to go and replace this, again, great harbor and great port that was there. But the site's going to remain vacant for over a century, which is, again, in our very much game of telephone that is history, gives a little bit of understanding of just how thorough and complete the destruction the Romans caused to Carthage. If for 100 years nobody lives there, or at least there's very little evidence of a lot of activity there. And so that's what the Carthaginians end up doing, all right, by fighting these Punic Wars, is get themselves literally broken up, sold into slavery, and have their city wiped off the face of the earth. And the Roman destruction of Carthage very much becomes a template or a kind of guideline throughout history of what complete and total destruction of one civilization to another looks like. If you go to Carthage today, you will see ruins from the Roman Empire, right? And not from the Carthaginians themselves, but the site that Caesar founds for veterans of his wars and his legions, and then goes and built it on top of there. But that's what we see here. So that very much allows for Rome to expand, and the Punic Wars allow for Rome to be able to grow and begin to take power and become extraordinarily wealthy. In our next lecture, we're going to understand what is the effect of all this wealth flowing into the Roman Empire going to have upon its people, and more important, the direction of its politics.